Today we're going to look at Stephen Brookfield and the power of critical theory, liberating adult learning and teaching. And in the blog today we'll consider a little bit of hegemony, power, and ideology related to critical theory. So firstly, critical theory is normatively grounded, which means that it's based on normative practices. And one of the considerations that I've always wondered about is that when we base things on norms, then are there times when there are some people that are always marginalized or always outside of the norm? And from a physical education perspective and teaching it, then it's always my consideration that when you do, for example, a majority vote, which is a norm-based activity in its own way, then there's students that are left outside of that on a regular basis, and there has to be some way of including them to some degree. So hegemony is where people embrace a dominant ideology because it's in their best interest, even though it may be an unjust social order. So an example of that is the student that I was just speaking of that is in physical education class, and the teacher does a majority vote, and so they don't like the activity, but they go along with it because of the fact that it's a majority vote. And then that happens in another class, and another class, and another class. So even though it may not be in their best interest, it may not be what they want to do, and it is in its own way an unjust social order, then they will go along with it. Brookfield uses the example that he questions if there would ever be a working class revolution in the United States of America, and because there's no increase in support for it or no dissent, then that's an example of hegemony. So if you look at the United States today, there's not, even though the market and the economy is tanked, then there's people are going along with it because it's in their best interests. A little bit on Foucault, Michel Foucault, and power. And Foucault says that it works in very subtle ways, and he views it as a circulation or a flow. And I kind of question like the power of the teacher within the classroom, and because Foucault identifies two types of power. One is sovereign power, where it's top down, and the other is disciplinary power, where it's individually based. And he says that we've gone from a situation of sovereign power, where it was top down before, to disciplinary power, where it's in the power now is based in the individuals. And so within the classroom, I feel that theory is true, because the teacher, even though you might look at the teacher as having sovereign power, really there is that circulation or flow of power whereby the teacher is afraid of the students for their complaints. They're afraid of the teacher or of the parents that they might complain, and then they're afraid of the administrator that they might complain. So even though the teacher is in the classroom, appears to have that sovereign power, really the power is within all of these other norm circles or communities of practice or groups. Hegemony is an emphasis of getting people to love their place. So, and that there is in terms of their place in society and where it is that they are. Then you have counter-hegemony, which would be the groups that are counter this here. That might be like the feminists or the Green Party, etc., that are going against the acceptance of the social norms or social practices. So power with rather than power over is the type of power that will create the revolution. So if it was the revolution in 1917 in the Soviet Union, then that there was where it's power with the people to effect change. Power with, Brookfield notes, is associated with empowerment. So, and unmasking the power is difficult because of what Foucault calls regimes of truth. And an example of that is where we have these phrases or explanations for the way things are. So survival of the fittest. So just because someone is always, let's say, marginalized because they're not, they don't do it well, then we say that they fail or they go by the wayside because it's survival of the fittest. Or another example he uses is the self-made man. So the success is because the individual is a self-made man, and for those that fail, well, there's no, you unmask power in that way because of these excuses or rationalities, or as Foucault calls them, the regimes of truth. Existing power imbalances are seen as a reflection of the natural order of things. And sometimes, even teaching physical education, I've always questioned when you look at athletic ability or musical ability or these things, they are in their own way power imbalances because someone is exceptional and someone is much weaker. And so again, people see it or justify it as a reflection of the natural order of things. It's interesting too with Brookfield's interest in adult learning, and I've always had an interest in self-directed learning, and it was really, I guess, illuminating that like some of the concepts that Brookfield brought up, such as the circle being considered a democratic, a liberating experience, whereas that's there, for some people that there is not so. Some of people will be, it will be intimidating, etc., and not a positive, liberating experience. So that there is a consideration in terms of looking at the whole scheme. Total freedom is never absolute, and Marcuse did not believe we could escape one-dimensional thought by relying on our own reasoning capacities. So, and one of the things that in terms of that Marcuse brought up here that I found interesting was he used the example of a poem or a space or a place or an experience to reach a different, a higher level of learning and reasoning capacities. And that is perhaps an opportunity for collaboration or an example of that can be gained sometimes through collaboration. Ideology, it means maintains power of dominant groups by portraying as universally true beliefs that serve the interests mainly of the dominant group. And another interesting point was that, again, the response to the majority principle in terms of majority decisions, that some people are alienated by these decisions. So the ideology maintains that power of the dominant group, and again, as I said before, it alienates some others that are in the marginalized group. So that's it on Brookfield, a great read, some great nuggets in there for further reading.